The three armed men blocking the parking garage never saw the janitor coming. 30 seconds later, they were unconscious on the concrete. By morning, the billionaire CEO he saved had tracked him down, and she knew exactly what he was trying to hide. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The security footage would later show that it took exactly 32 seconds. 32 seconds for Marcus Chun to drop three men, each one twice his size, each one armed, each one convinced they were about to get away with something terrible. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, in the dimming light of the underground parking garage, all Marcus heard was a woman's scream slicing through the concrete silence like a blade. Please. Someone help. He'd been taking out the trash. That was his job, after all. Marcus Chun, night janitor for the towering glass monument that was Apex Industries, the kind of building where fortunes were made on the 40th floor while he mopped the lobbies on the first. He was invisible in his navy blue work uniform, pushing his cart with its squeaky wheel, a ghost among the marble and steel, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Invisibility was safety. Invisibility was peace. Invisibility meant no one asked questions about who he used to be. The woman's scream shattered all of that in an instant. Marcus had been wheeling his cart toward the service elevator, the smell of industrial cleaner sharp in his nostrils. When the sound reached him from the executive parking level below, his body reacted before his mind could catch up, every muscle tensing with a memory he had spent 5 years trying to forget. He abandoned his cart, the wheels still spinning slowly, and moved toward the stairwell with a speed that contradicted the careful slowness he had cultivated in his new life. The parking garage was a cathedral of shadows and yellow sodium lights. Marcus emerged from the stairwell into a scene that would replay in his nightmares for weeks to come, though not for the reasons anyone might expect. Three men, large and confident in their violence, had cornered a woman against a silver Mercedes. She was small, expensively dressed in a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. Her handbag lay on the concrete, its contents scattered like fallen stars. One of the men had her by the arm, his grip leaving marks that would purple by morning. Another was rifling through her purse while the third stood watch, a gun held casually at his side as if it were no more significant than a set of car keys. The woman was fighting. She was not crying, not pleading beyond that first scream that had summoned Marcus from his quiet world. She was struggling with a fury that spoke of someone who had never been touched without permission, someone who could not comprehend that the universe would allow this violation. Her heel connected with one attacker's shin, and he cursed, tightening his grip until she gasped in pain. That was when she saw Marcus. Their eyes met across 20 feet of oil-stained concrete. Hers were dark, intelligent, blazing with rage and terror in equal measure. And in that instant, she saw something in him that no one had seen in 5 years. She saw what he used to be. Marcus Chun had not always been a janitor. Once, in another life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely, he had been Lieutenant Marcus Chun of the Special Forces, a man trained in 17 different ways to neutralize a threat. A man who had operated in places that did not officially exist, doing things that were never officially acknowledged. He had been very, very good at his job. He had also lost every single person in his unit in an ambush that still woke him at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat and grief. The sole survivor. The one who came home to a parade he did not want and medals he could not bear to look at. The one who had walked away from it all and chosen the quietest, most invisible life he could find. But some things, once learned, cannot be unlearned. The men did not even see him coming. Marcus moved with a fluid economy of motion that would have been beautiful if it were not so terrifying. The man with the gun turned, his mouth opening to shout a warning, but Marcus was already inside his guard. A precise strike to the wrist, and the gun clattered to the ground, spinning across the concrete. An elbow to the solar plexus, and the man folded, the air driven from his lungs. Marcus was already moving to the second attacker, the one holding the woman. He used the man's grip against him, twisting the arm in a way that anatomy did not accommodate, forcing him to release her or break his own elbow. The man chose release, stumbling backward with a howl of pain. The woman dropped to the ground, scrambling away on her hands and knees, her expensive suit tearing at the knee. Marcus positioned himself between her and the threat, his body a wall, his stance wide and balanced. The third man, the one who had been going through her purse, dropped it and charged. He was large, easily 240 pounds of muscle and bad intentions. Marcus sidestepped, grabbed the back of the man's collar, and used his own momentum to introduce his face to a concrete pillar. The sound was sickening. A wet crunch that echoed through the garage. The man slid down the pillar and did not move. The first man had recovered his breath, reaching for the gun. Marcus was faster. He kicked it away, the weapon skittering under a nearby car, and then he was on the man, delivering a series of strikes that were measured, controlled, designed to incapacitate without killing. It was like playing a violent piano, each note precise, each movement flowing into the next. The man went down hard, curling into a fetal position, groaning. The second man, the one whose arm Marcus had nearly broken, had the wisdom to stay down. He was clutching his elbow, his face gray with pain, his eyes wide with the realization that he had chosen the wrong victim tonight. Marcus stood in the center of the carnage, breathing steadily, not even winded. His hands were not shaking. His heart was not racing. He felt nothing but a cold, empty efficiency, and that scared him more than anything else. 32 seconds. That was all it had taken to remember who he used to be. That was all it had taken to shatter 5 years of careful invisibility. Marcus turned to the woman. She was still on the ground, staring up at him with an expression he could not quite read. It was not gratitude, not yet. It was something more complicated, something that looked almost like recognition. He extended his hand to help her up, and for a moment she simply stared at it as if it were a foreign object, something dangerous and unpredictable. Then slowly she reached out and took it. Her hand was small and cold in his, trembling slightly despite the strength he had seen in her moments before. He pulled her to her feet with a gentleness that contradicted everything that had just happened. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was low, steady, the voice of someone who had asked this question before in much worse circumstances. She shook her head, though he could see the red marks blooming on her arm where the man had gripped her, could see the tear in her stockings and the scrape on her knee. She was lying, but he did not press. People lied about being hurt for 1,000 different reasons, and most of them were about dignity. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could form the words, the garage exploded with the sound of sirens and the screech of tires. Security must have been alerted. Marcus glanced toward the approaching vehicles, their lights painting the concrete in shades of red and blue, and felt a familiar weight settle over him. Attention, questions, exposure, everything he had spent 5 years avoiding. The woman seemed to sense his tension. She stepped closer, her hand still in his, and spoke quickly, her voice low and urgent. "Wait, please wait. They're going to want a statement. They're going to want to know who you are." Marcus gently extracted his hand from hers. "I am nobody," he said simply. "Just the janitor who happened to be here." He took a step back, preparing to fade into the shadows, to disappear back into his invisible life, but she caught his arm. Her grip surprisingly strong for someone so small. Her eyes, no longer filled with terror, were now burning with an intensity that pinned him in place. "I do not even know your name," she said. "Marcus," he replied reluctantly. "Marcus Chun." She nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory, filing it away for future reference. Her lips moved, forming words that only he could hear beneath the approaching chaos. "Thank you, Marcus Chun. I will not forget this. I will not forget you." And there was something in the way she said it, something in the set of her jaw and the steel in her voice that sent a chill down his spine. It was not a promise of gratitude. It was a promise of something far more complicated, far more dangerous. It was the promise that his invisible life had just come to an end. The security vehicles screeched to a halt. Officers pouring out, radios crackling with urgent chatter. The 3 attackers were beginning to stir, groaning and cursing. And Marcus Chun, who had wanted nothing more than to be forgotten, found himself standing in the harsh glare of a spotlight, with a woman whose eyes held a determination that told him everything was about to change. Marcus had given his statement 3 times. Once to building security, once to the responding police officers, and once more to a detective who had shown up 20 minutes later with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. Each time, he had told the same story in the same flat, emotionless tone. He had heard a scream. He had responded. He had defended himself and the victim. The men had weapons, had training from his military service. Self-defense was clear-cut. The detective had looked at him with the expression of someone who knew there was more to the story but could not quite put his finger on what was missing. The woman, whose name he had learned was Victoria Hayes, had corroborated everything. She had been articulate, precise, and utterly convincing in her gratitude. She had also, Marcus noticed, been careful not to describe exactly how efficiently he had neutralized 3 armed men. She had kept it vague, using phrases like "it all happened so fast and he protected." She was smart. She understood instinctively that the less detail given about his capabilities, the fewer questions would be asked about where those capabilities had come from. Marcus was not sure whether to be grateful or suspicious. By the time they let him go, it was nearly 2 in the morning. His shift had ended hours ago, but his cart was still sitting where he had abandoned it, the trash bags waiting patiently to be taken to the dumpster. Marcus returned to it like a man returning to a life raft after nearly drowning. He finished his rounds in silence, the building empty except for the hum of the HVAC system and the occasional click of his shoes on the polished floors. His hands were steady as he mopped. His breathing was even. But inside, in the place where he kept all the locked doors he refused to open, something was rattling its chains. He had felt it in the garage. The cold clarity, the muscle memory, the absolute certainty of violence. He had felt alive in a way he had not felt in 5 years. And that terrified him more than the 3 men ever could have, because being good at violence, being comfortable with it, that was not the kind of life he wanted anymore. That was the life that had cost him everything. His team, his best friend, his ability to sleep through the night without seeing their faces. He had walked away from that world because staying in it would have destroyed what little of his soul remained. Marcus clocked out at 3:15 in the morning, his time card punching with a mechanical thunk that echoed in the empty break room. He walked to the bus stop in the pre-dawn darkness, the city around him just beginning to stir. A delivery truck rumbled past. A homeless man shuffled by, pushing a shopping cart filled with aluminum cans that clinked like wind chimes. The world was indifferent to what had happened in that parking garage, and Marcus found comfort in that indifference. He wanted to be a clink of cans in someone else's story, not the main character in his own. He arrived at his apartment as the sun was threatening the horizon with streaks of pink and gold. It was a small 1-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades, with thin walls and a radiator that clanked like a prisoner trying to escape. But it was his. paid for with the money he earned mopping floors, and no one here knew who he used to be. The neighbor to his left thought he was boring. The neighbor to his right did not think of him at all. Perfect. Marcus microwaved a cup of instant noodles and sat at his small kitchen table staring at nothing, trying to convince himself that tonight would not change anything. He had done what anyone would have done. He had helped someone in need. Tomorrow he would return to work, push his cart, clean the bathrooms, and fade back into invisibility. He almost believed it. He fell asleep on his couch, still in his work uniform, too tired to even make it to the bedroom. His dreams were the usual fragmented chaos of fire and blood in the faces of men who no longer had faces. He woke 3 hours later to his phone ringing, a shrill, insistent sound that dragged him from sleep like a fishhook. Marcus fumbled for it, his heart pounding, his body already moving into a defensive position before his brain caught up. The number was unknown. He let it ring. It called back immediately. Unknown caller, urgent, persistent. Against his better judgment, Marcus answered. "Mr. Chun," a woman's voice said. It was professional, crisp, the voice of someone who was used to being listened to. "This is Amanda Winters, executive assistant to Victoria Hayes. Miss Hayes would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience." There was no earliest convenience. There's only leave me alone. "I gave my statement to the police," Marcus said, his voice rough with sleep. "Everything I know is in that report." "This is not about the police report," Amanda replied smoothly. "Miss Hayes simply wanted to thank you personally and discuss a private matter. She's willing to compensate you for your time, of course." Marcus closed his eyes. Compensation. That was how people like Victoria Hayes operated. Something happens, write a check, make it go away. He had no interest in her money or her gratitude or whatever private matter she thought they needed to discuss. "Tell Miss Hayes I appreciate the thought, but it is not necessary," Marcus said. "I was just doing what anyone would do." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that felt loaded. "Mr. Chun," Amanda said, and now there was something different in her voice, something almost like respect. "Miss Hayes does not take no for an answer. She would consider it a personal favor if you would meet with her. Just 30 minutes of your time. Lunch is on her. Any restaurant you choose." Marcus wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to hang up, block the number, and pretend this conversation had never happened. But there was something in the assistant's tone, a hint that this was not just about gratitude. This was about something else. Something important enough that Victoria Hayes was willing to hunt down a night janitor and drag him into her world. "Fine," Marcus heard himself say. 30 minutes, but somewhere quiet, not fancy. There's a diner on 5th and Market. Blue Star Diner. Noon today. He hung up before Amanda could respond, before he could change his mind. He sat on his couch, staring at his phone, wondering what kind of mistake he had just made. It had 6 hours until noon. He should have used them to sleep, to rest, to prepare for another night shift. Instead, he showered, changed into the only civilian clothes he owned that did not have paint stains or holes, and spent the rest of the morning pacing his small apartment like a caged animal. He tried to read. He tried to watch television. He tried to convince himself that this was nothing, just a brief inconvenience, a thank you lunch that would be over in half an hour, and then forgotten. But Marcus Chun had not survived 3 tours in hostile territory by ignoring his instinct, and his instincts were telling him that Victoria Hayes was not the kind of problem that disappeared after lunch. He arrived at the Blue Star Diner at 11:45, 15 minutes early, a habit from his old life that he had never been able to shake. The diner was exactly as he remembered it, a relic from the 1950s with cracked red vinyl booths, a checkerboard floor, and a jukebox in the corner that probably had not worked since the Reagan administration. It smelled like coffee and frying bacon, a smell that was somehow both comforting and sad. Marcus took a booth in the back corner facing the door, his back to the wall. Another old habit. He ordered black coffee and waited. Victoria Hayes arrived at exactly noon. She was not alone. She walked through the door flanked by 2 men in dark suits who looked like they had been assembled in a factory that specialized in intimidation. Bodyguards, clearly. Marcus watched them scan the diner, their eyes cataloging every exit, every potential threat, every person. One of them locked eyes with Marcus, and something passed between them, a recognition that they were both men who understood violence professionally. The bodyguard said something to Victoria and she nodded, then walked to Marcus's booth alone while her protection detail took up positions near the entrance. She looked different in daylight. The terror and rage from last night had been replaced by a carefully constructed mask of composure. Her suit was dark blue today, perfectly tailored, her hair pulled back in a way that was both elegant and severe. But Marcus could see the shadows under her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands as she slid into the booth across from it. She had not slept either. "Mr. Chun," she said, "thank you for agreeing to meet." He nodded, saying nothing, waiting. She was the one who had requested this meeting. She could lead the conversation. Victoria seemed to appreciate his silence. She folded her hands on the table and he noticed the bruises on her arm, purple and yellow, a perfect handprint. She had tried to cover them with makeup, but the edges were visible beneath her sleeve. "I wanted to thank you properly," she began. "What you did last night, most people would have walked away. They would have called security from a safe distance and let trained professionals handle it. You did not. You put yourself between me and those men without hesitation. That kind of courage is rare." "It was not courage," Marcus said quietly. It was training, muscle memory, nothing heroic about it. Victoria studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes intelligent and searching. I do not believe that, she said. Training might explain how you did what you did, but it does not explain why. You could have been hurt. You could have been killed. That gun was real, Mr. Chun, but you did not hesitate, not for a second. Marcus picked up his coffee, buying himself time. He did not know how to explain to this woman that hesitation was a luxury he had lost a long time ago. That when you had watched your best friend bleed out in your arms while you were pinned down by enemy fire, your relationship with risk fundamentally changed. You stopped weighing the odds and started operating on a simpler calculus. Someone needs help, you help. The rest is just noise. Anyone would have done the same, he said, deflecting. Victoria shook her head. No. They would not have. I know this because I have spent the last 6 hours having my head of security pull every piece of footage from that garage, from the building, from anywhere you have ever appeared on camera. Do you know what I found? Marcus felt his stomach drop. Nothing, she continued. Or rather, exactly what you wanted me to find. A quiet man who shows up for his shifts on time, does his job without complaint, and disappears. No social media presence, no digital footprint beyond what is absolutely necessary. You are a ghost, Mr. Chun, and ghosts are hiding from something. The words hung between them. An accusation dressed up as an observation. Marcus met her gaze and saw that she was not going to let this go. Whatever she wanted, whatever private matter had prompted this lunch, it was not going to be as simple as thank you and goodbye. What do you want, Miss Hayes? He asked, his voice flat. The truth, she said. And then, because I think I might need your help with something far more dangerous than 3 men in a parking garage. Marcus should have walked away right then. Every survival instinct he had honed over years of combat and years of hiding told him to stand up, thank her for the coffee, and disappear back into his invisible life. But something kept him rooted to the cracked vinyl booth. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way her hands trembled despite her controlled voice. Maybe it was simply that he recognized something in her eyes, the look of someone who had run out of options and was making one last desperate play. I am not a bodyguard, Marcus said carefully. If that is what you are looking for, I can recommend some excellent private security firms. Victoria shook her head, a small bitter smile touching her lips. I have bodyguards, Mr. Chun. You saw them when I walked in. I have an entire security team that costs me more per month than most people make in a year. They are all former military, former law enforcement, extensively trained and thoroughly vetted. And last night, not one of them was there when I needed them most. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Do you know why I was in that parking garage alone at 11 at night? Marcus said nothing, but his silence was an invitation to continue. Because someone in my organization told those men exactly where I would be and exactly when I would be there. Because someone close to me, someone I trust enough to know my schedule, my security protocols, my movements, set me up to be robbed. Or worse, the words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Marcus felt his mind shifting gears, moving from the reflexive desire to flee into the analytical mode he had thought he had left behind. If that was true, if she had been deliberately targeted by someone inside her own organization, then last night was not a random mugging. It was an attempted hit disguised as a robbery. You went to the police with this, he said. It was not a question. Her laugh was sharp and humorless. And tell them what? That I have a feeling someone set me up. That I suspect one of my executives or assistants or security personnel is trying to harm me, but I have absolutely no proof. They would pat me on the head and tell me I am traumatized from the attack, that I am being paranoid. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope, sliding it across the table. These are the things that have happened to me in the last 3 months. Go ahead, look. Marcus hesitated, then opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, printed emails, incident reports. He spread them across the table, his trained eye cataloging the information with grim efficiency. A near miss with a delivery truck that had run a red light while she was crossing the street. Security camera footage showed the truck had no license plates. A severe allergic reaction to shellfish at a company dinner, despite her allergy being clearly documented and the caterers being explicitly instructed. The shellfish had been in a dish that was supposed to be vegetarian. A broken elevator cable that had caused her private elevator to drop 3 floors before the emergency brakes caught. Maintenance records showed the cable had been serviced the week before and was in perfect condition. Any one of these could be an accident, Victoria said, watching him examine the evidence. But all of them together, all within 3 months, all happening to me specifically? That is not coincidence, Mr. Chun. That is someone trying very hard to make my death look like an unfortunate series of mishaps. Marcus carefully gathered the papers and photographs, sliding them back into the envelope. His mind was racing through possibilities, threat assessments, the kind of tactical analysis he had promised himself he would never do again. Why you? He asked. Who benefits from your death? Victoria leaned back, and for the first time she looked truly tired, the mask of the powerful executive cracking to reveal the frightened woman underneath. I am the CEO of Hayes Technologies, she said. We are the 3rd largest defense contractor in the country. We hold patents on weapon systems, surveillance technology, drone platforms that half a dozen foreign governments would kill to get their hands on. Literally kill. She paused, gathering herself. 6 months ago, my father, who founded the company, passed away. He left controlling interest to me, his only child. That decision did not sit well with everyone. There are board members who think I am too young, too inexperienced, too female to run the company. There are competitors who would love to see Hayes Technologies destabilized. There are foreign actors who have tried to bribe, blackmail, and steal from us for years. And then there is him, she added, her voice hardening. My ex-husband, Derek Castellan. We divorced 8 months ago and it was not amicable. He worked for the company, high-level operations, and he had access to everything. When we split, I had him removed from his position. He did not take it well. He has made threats, Mr. Chun, nothing overt enough to get a restraining order, but clear enough that I know he blames me for ruining his career and his reputation. Marcus processed this information, fitting the pieces together like a puzzle made of knives. So you have a long list of people who might want you dead or incapacitated. You have proof that someone is trying to make that happen. You do not trust your own security team because the person trying to kill you clearly has inside information. Exactly, Victoria said. Which is why I need someone from the outside. Someone who has no connection to my company, my life, my world. Someone who cannot be bought or compromised because they have nothing to lose. She met his eyes and he saw the steel beneath the fear. Someone like you. Marcus shook his head slowly. You do not know anything about me. You ran a background check and found nothing because there is nothing to find. I mopped floors, Miss Hayes. That is my entire life. I am not the person you need. You neutralized 3 armed men in 32 seconds, she countered. I timed it on the security footage. 32 seconds from the moment you entered the frame to the moment the last man went down. You move like someone who has done this 1,000 times before. So do not insult my intelligence by pretending you are just a janitor. The diner suddenly felt too small. The walls closing in. Marcus could feel the eyes of her bodyguards on them, could sense the weight of the choice she was trying to force on him. He had walked away from this life. He had buried his uniforms, packed his medals in a box he never opened, and chosen obscurity because the alternative was drowning in the memories of everyone he had failed to save. I cannot help you, he said, and he meant it. Not because he was incapable, but because going back to that world, even for a worthy cause, would destroy him. Find someone else. There are hundreds of qualified people who do this for a living. Victoria reached across the table and placed her hand on his. A gesture that was both intimate and desperate. I'm offering you $1 million, Mr. Chun. $500,000 up front. $500,000 when you find out who is trying to kill me and stop them. You can work your night shifts. Maintain your cover as a janitor. No one will know you are working for me. All I need is someone I can trust to watch my back and investigate from the inside without tipping off whoever's behind this. $1 million for what could be a few weeks of work. The number hung in the air between them, obscene in its magnitude. Marcus made $32,000 a year mopping floors. $1 million was generational wealth, the kind of money that could change everything. He could disappear, really disappear, somewhere far away where the nightmares might not follow. He could build a different life, one with actual choices. But money had never been what motivated him. When he had been Lieutenant Chun, he had been offered lucrative private security contracts, mercenary work that paid 10 times his military salary. He had turned them all down because the money did not matter if the cost was his soul. And this, helping a billionaire CEO navigate corporate intrigue and assassination attempts, this was not the kind of cause that would justify stepping back into the darkness. I am sorry, he said, standing up from the booth. I hope you find who is doing this, and I hope you stay safe, but I'm not your man. He turned to leave, and Victoria's voice stopped him cold. 2 weeks ago, she said, her voice breaking, they tried to make it look like an accident with my car. The brakes failed while I was driving on the highway. I almost died, and I would have, except my daughter was supposed to be in the car with me that day. She had a fever, so I left her home with the nanny. Whoever did this did not care that they might kill a 7-year-old girl along with me. Marcus froze, his hand on the back of the booth. He did not turn around, but every muscle in his body had gone rigid. You have a daughter, he said quietly. Her name is Sophie, Victoria replied, and now there were tears in her voice that she was no longer trying to hide. She is 7 years old, and she loves dinosaurs and thinks broccoli is a vegetable conspiracy. She does not understand why mommy has bodyguards now, or why she cannot go to the park without armed men following her. She just knows that something has changed, that her mother is scared, and children should not have to see that fear. I am not asking you to do this for me, Mr. Chun. I am asking you to do it for a little girl who deserves to grow up with a mother. Marcus closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his lids, he saw another child, a little boy in a village that no longer existed, holding the hand of a soldier who had promised to keep him safe. He saw the moment that promise had been broken, the moment when everything had gone wrong and he had failed in the most complete and devastating way possible. He had sworn he would never make another promise he could not keep, never put himself in a position where someone else's life depended on his ability to be perfect. But standing in that diner with the smell of coffee and bacon and the weight of Victoria Hayes' desperation pressing against his back, Marcus realized something that terrified him. He was going to say yes, not for the money, not for the challenge, but because a 7-year-old girl named Sophie loved dinosaurs and should not have to grow up afraid. He turned around slowly. Victoria was still sitting in the booth, tears streaming down her face, her composure finally shattered. 2 weeks, Marcus said, his voice rough. I will give you 2 weeks to find who is doing this. After that, I am gone, whether we have answers or not. And if I find out you have lied to me about anything at all, I walk immediately. No questions, no explanations. Understood? Victoria wiped her eyes, nodding frantically. Understood. When do we start? Tonight, Marcus said. I need complete access to your security files, personnel records, anyone who has access to your schedule. I need floor plans of your home, your office, every place you go regularly, and I need you to act like nothing has changed. You are still scared, still paranoid, but you have not hired anyone. As far as anyone knows, I am still just the janitor. He paused, the weight of what he was agreeing to settling over him like a familiar, unwelcome coat. And Miss Hayes, one more thing. If this goes badly, if whoever is after you decides to escalate, I cannot promise I can save you. I have failed before at protecting people. I need you to understand that. Victoria stood up, walked around the table, and extended her hand. I understand, she said, and I trust you anyway. Marcus shook her hand, sealing a deal that felt like a pact with something far darker than simple employment. As he watched her leave with her bodyguards, he felt the last remnants of his peaceful, invisible life crumbling away like ash. Lieutenant Marcus Chun had just come out of retirement, and God help them all. Marcus spent the afternoon in his apartment, surrounded by files that Victoria had couriered over in a locked briefcase. The courier had been one of her bodyguards, the one who had recognized something in Marcus back at the diner. He had handed over the briefcase without a word, but his eyes had asked a question Marcus chose not to answer. Now, alone with the evidence of Victoria Hayes' life spread across his kitchen table, Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling over his shoulders like an old uniform that no longer quite fit. The personnel files were extensive. Hayes Technologies employed over 3,000 people, but Victoria had narrowed it down to a short list of 47 individuals who had regular access to her schedule, her movements, or her personal security protocols. Marcus read through each file methodically, making notes in a small spiral notebook, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that might flag someone as a threat. There was Thomas Brennan, the chief security officer, former Secret Service, impeccable record, but he had been passed over for a promotion 6 months ago. There was Jessica Liu, Victoria's personal assistant for 3 years, access to everything, but also a gambling problem that HR had flagged and then apparently dismissed. There was Marcus's particular focus, Derek Castelline, the ex-husband. His file was thicker than the others, and someone, probably Victoria, had paper-clipped several printed emails to the front. The emails were from Derek's personal account to various business contacts sent after the divorce. In them, he referred to Victoria as a manipulative sociopath who had destroyed his career out of spite. He claimed she had stolen his ideas, taken credit for his work, and poisoned the board against him. The emails grew progressively more bitter, more unhinged. The last one, dated 3 weeks ago, simply said, "She will get what is coming to her, and I will be there to watch." Marcus set that file aside. Derek was an obvious suspect, perhaps too obvious. In his experience, the people who made explicit threats were rarely the ones who followed through. Real killers, the professional ones, did not announce their intentions. They worked in silence, in the margins, where no one thought to look. Still, Derek could not be ruled out. Rage made people stupid, and stupid people were dangerous in their unpredictability. He continued through the files, cross-referencing names with the incident reports, looking for anyone who had been present or had advanced knowledge of Victoria's whereabouts during each near-miss. A pattern began to emerge. Subtle, but there. 3 names appeared on every single incident report, either directly or peripherally. Thomas Brennan, the security chief, Jessica Liu, the assistant, and Martin Cross, the chief financial officer and senior board member who had been her father's right hand for 20 years. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the 3 names circled in his notebook. One of them, or all of them, working together. He needed more information, needed to get inside Hayes Technologies, not as an investigator, but as the invisible man he had trained himself to be. He needed to watch these people when they thought no one was watching, to see the faces they showed when the masks came off, and for that, he needed to be exactly what he had been for the past 5 years. Nobody. At 7 in the evening, Marcus reported for his night shift at Apex Industries. His supervisor, a perpetually exhausted man named Eddie who smelled like cigarettes and defeat, barely looked up when Marcus clocked in. "You hear about the excitement in the parking garage last night?" Eddie asked, sorting through work orders. "Some woman got attacked and one of the night crew played hero." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "I heard something about it," Eddie grunted. "Management is losing their minds. Liability concerns, security review, the whole 9 yards. They are bringing in some hotshot consultant to assess our protocols. Just what we need, more people in suits telling us how to do our jobs." Marcus wheeled his cart out of the custodial office, heading toward the executive floors. Hayes Technologies occupied floors 30 through 45 of the Apex Industries building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the city's skyline. Victoria's office was on the 45th floor, a penthouse suite with a view that probably cost more per month than Marcus's entire apartment building. He had never cleaned those floors before. That was reserved for the day ones who were deemed presentable enough to be seen by executives. But tonight, Eddie had given him a new assignment. One of the day janitors had called in sick, and Marcus was covering the executive wing. A coincidence, or Victoria's doing? He suspected the latter. The 45th floor after hours was a different world. The hustle of the day had given way to an eerie quiet, broken only by the hum of computers left running and the distant ping of an elevator. Most of the offices were dark. their occupants long gone to homes and families and lives that did not require working until midnight, but a few lights remained. Marcus pushed his cart slowly down the corridor, his eyes cataloging everything. Security cameras at every junction, keycard access to the executive suite, motion sensors on the windows. Brennan had built a fortress, which meant either he was very good at his job or very good at covering his tracks. Victoria's office door was closed, but not locked. Marcus knocked softly, then entered when he heard her voice. She was sitting at her desk, still in her work clothes, surrounded by papers and glowing computer screens. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment, he saw relief flash across her face before she schooled it back into professional neutrality. "Mr. Chun," she said, loud enough for anyone who might be listening, "thank you for covering tonight. I spilled coffee earlier and it has been driving me mad all day. The stain is near the bookshelf." Marcus nodded, playing his part. "Not a problem, Miss Hayes. I will get that cleaned up for you." He moved to the bookshelf, kneeling down with his cleaning supplies, and she rose from her desk, walking over as if to show him the exact location of the stain. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Did you look at the files?" she asked. Marcus kept his eyes on the carpet, scrubbing at a stain that did not exist. "I did. I need you to set up meetings for me with 3 people. Casual, nothing that would seem unusual. Coffee, lunch, whatever makes sense. Thomas Brennan, Jessica Liu, and Martin Cross. I need to see them in their natural habitat. See how they interact with you when they think it is just routine." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Martin," she said, and there was pain in her voice. "He was my father's best friend. He has been like an uncle to me." Marcus paused his scrubbing. "That is exactly why we need to look at him. The people closest to you are the ones with the most opportunity and the most to gain. I am not saying he is guilty, but I am not ruling him out either." She nodded, though he could not see her face from his position on the floor. "I will arrange it. Anything else?" "Yes," Marcus said. "I need you to tell me about the night your father died. How it happened, where you were, who was there." Victoria's sharp intake of breath was audible. "My father had a heart attack in his office. It was late, after 10. The coroner said it was massive, instantaneous. He was 72 and had a history of heart problem. There was no question about the cause of death." Marcus filed that information away, another piece that did not quite fit. A heart attack. At night in his office, just months before someone started trying to kill his daughter. Coincidence was becoming a pattern he did not like. He finished his theatrical cleaning and stood up. "I will check in tomorrow night, same time. Until then, vary your route home. Do not tell anyone, not even your bodyguards, until you are already in the car. And Miss Hayes, be careful who you trust. Everyone is a suspect until they are not." He left her there, pushing his cart back into the hallway, resuming his invisible existence. He cleaned offices, emptied trash cans, mopped floors, all while his mind worked through scenarios and threat assessments. At midnight, he encountered Thomas Brennan in the Security Command Center, a room filled with monitors showing every angle of every floor. Brennan was reviewing footage, his jaw tight, his eyes bloodshot from staring at screens. He glanced up when Marcus entered to empty the trash. "You are the one from last night," Brennan said. It was not a question. "The janitor who took down 3 armed men." Marcus shrugged. "I got lucky. They were not expecting resistance." Brennan studied him with the intensity of someone trained to read people. "That was not luck. I have seen the footage a dozen times. That was training." "Military?" Marcus met his gaze, letting a little of the truth show. "Marine Corps. Long time ago. Different life." Brennan nodded slowly. "I was Secret Service for 15 years. You develop an eye for people who know how to handle themselves. You did good work last night. The CEO is lucky you were there." Marcus emptied the trash can, taking his time, letting the silence stretch. "She seems pretty shaken up about the whole thing," he said casually. "Can't blame her. This building is supposed to be secure." Brennan's expression darkened. "It is secure. That attack should never have happened. Someone knew her schedule, knew when her security detail was changing shifts, knew exactly where to hit her." He turned back to his monitors, his hands clenched into fists. "I have been doing this job for 3 years, and I have never had a breach like that. It makes me look incompetent. Makes me look like I cannot protect the people I am paid to protect." Genuine frustration in his voice, the anger of a professional whose pride had been wounded. Marcus watched him, recalibrating his assessment. This did not sound like a man who had orchestrated the attack. This sounded like a man who had been bypassed, undermined, made to look foolish. Either Brennan was innocent, or he was a very good actor. "I am sure you will figure out what happened," Marcus said, heading for the door. It seemed like someone who does not give up easy. Brennan glanced back at him, a grim smile on his face. "You've got that right. Whoever set her up, they made it personal, and I do not forget personal." Marcus left the command center with more questions than answers. If Brennan was behind the attacks, he was playing a dangerous game, publicly promising to find the culprit while privately orchestrating the hits. But if he was innocent, then he was an asset. Someone who could be maneuvered into helping without knowing he was being used. The rest of the night passed without incident. Marcus finished his rounds at 3 in the morning, clocked out, and took the bus back to his apartment as the city began its daily resurrection. He should have been exhausted. He should have collapsed into bed and fallen into the fitful sleep that was all he could manage these days. Instead, he found himself lying awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling, thinking about a 7-year-old girl named Sophie who loved dinosaurs. He thought about promises made and broken, about the weight of other people's lives and the crushing responsibility of trying to keep them safe. He thought about Victoria Victoria Hayes, so composed and controlled, cracking in his presence, showing him the fear she could not show anyone else. And he thought about the fact that for the first time in 5 years he felt something other than numbness. He felt purpose. It was terrifying, it was exhilarating, and it was going to get him killed if he was not careful. But as dawn broke over the city, painting his shabby apartment in shades of gold and gray, Marcus Chun accepted the truth he had been running from since the moment he had heard that scream in the parking garage. He was not done being a soldier. He had never been done. He had just been waiting for a war worth fighting. And now, whether he was ready or not, that war had found him. The coffee meeting with Jessica Liu happened 3 days later in the executive break room, a space that looked more like a high-end hotel lobby than a place where people microwaved leftovers. Victoria had arranged it perfectly, a casual encounter between CEO and assistant, discussing the week's schedule over artisanal lattes. Marcus was there to restock the coffee supplies, invisible as always, but his ears were finely tuned to every word. Jessica was in her early 30s, sharp-featured and sharper dressed, with the kind of nervous energy that came from managing the life of someone infinitely more powerful than yourself. She scrolled through her tablet, rattling off appointments with military precision. "You have the board meeting at 9, lunch with Senator Wickham at noon, and the quarterly review at 3, Jessica said. "And I moved your dentist appointment to next week because Martin wanted to squeeze in a budget discussion tomorrow morning. Is 7 too early?" Victoria sipped her coffee, and Marcus noticed the slight tightness around her eyes. 7 is fine. Has Martin seemed stressed to you lately?" Jessica looked up from her tablet, her expression carefully neutral. "No more than usual. The quarterly numbers have been challenging." "Why do you ask?" Victoria shrugged. A perfect display of casual curiosity. "No reason. He just seemed distracted at last week's meeting. I wanted to make sure everything was all right." Jessica's fingers moved across her tablet screen, and Marcus caught the slight hesitation before she spoke. "You know, Martin, he keeps things close to the vest. But if something was wrong, he would tell you. You were like family to him." The words hung in the air, and Marcus watched Victoria's reaction carefully. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Of course, you are right." Marcus finished restocking the coffee station and moved to wipe down the counter, his movements slow and methodical. He was close enough now to see Jessica's tablet screen reflected in the stainless steel of the espresso machine. She was looking at Victoria's calendar, but there was another window open in the background, partially obscured, an email client with a message thread visible. He could not read the full content, but he caught fragments. "Schedule confirmed and south entrance in 11:15. His pulse quickened, but his hands remained steady as he cleaned. Jessica closed the window quickly, too quickly, and returned her full attention to Victoria. "Is there anything else you need me to handle today?" she asked. Victoria shook her head. "No, thank you, Jessica. You have been invaluable as always. I honestly do not know how I would function without you." Jessica smiled, and for just a moment something flickered across her face. It might have been pride. It might have been guilt. Marcus could not quite tell. The two women finished their coffee, and Jessica left first, her heels clicking efficiently down the marble corridor. Victoria remained, pretending to check her own phone, waiting until they were alone. "Well?" she asked quietly, not looking at Marcus. He continued wiping the already spotless counter. "She is hiding something. I need access to her computer, her phone records, anything that shows her communications outside of official channels. Can you get that?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I can get you her work computer access remotely. The phone records will be harder. She uses her personal cell for most things, and I cannot just demand to see it without cause." "Then we do it the old-fashioned way," Marcus said. "We follow her. See where she goes, who she talks to, what she does when she thinks no one is watching. Are you comfortable with that level of surveillance on someone who has been loyal to you for 3 years? Victoria finally looked at him, and her expression was steely. "I'm comfortable doing whatever it takes to protect my daughter. If Jessica is innocent, she will never know we looked. If she is guilty, then her loyalty was a lie anyway." Marcus nodded. "Fair enough. What about the lunch with Martin Cross?" "That is tomorrow. 1 o'clock at the Riverside Club. It is his favorite restaurant, and he suggested it. Do you want to be there?" "I will be there," Marcus confirmed. "Not at your table, but close enough. I want to see how he acts around you, what his tells are when he is relaxed. And Victoria, at some point during the lunch, I need you to mention your father. Watch his reaction. Probe gently about the night he died. See if Martin volunteers any information we do not already have." Her face paled slightly. "You think Martin had something to do with my father's death?" "I think your father died suddenly, and 6 months later someone started trying to kill you. I think that is a timeline worth examining. I am not making accusations, but I'm not ignoring connections either." Victoria stood up, her coffee cup clutched in both hands like a lifeline. "My father trusted Martin with everything. They built this company together from nothing. If Martin betrayed him, if he hurt him, then nothing I believe about the world is true." Marcus met her eyes with a gentleness that surprised them both. "Sometimes the hardest part of finding the truth is accepting what it reveals about the people we love. Be prepared for that possibility." She left without another word, and Marcus was alone with the espresso machine and the weight of suspicions that were beginning to coalesce into something darker. He spent the rest of the day sleeping in fitful bursts, his dreams filled with fragmented images of Victoria's father collapsing in his office, of Jessica's fingers flying across her tablet, of Thomas Brennan staring at security monitors that showed nothing because the threat was already inside. When evening came, Marcus did not go to his shift at Apex Industries. Instead, he sat in his battered sedan across the street from Hayes Technologies, watching the employees stream out as the workday ended. He had called in sick the first time in 5 years, and Eddie had been too surprised to even question it. Marcus watched Jessica Liu emerge at 6:30. Her designer purse slung over one shoulder, her phone pressed to her ear. She was talking animatedly, her free hand gesturing as she walked toward the parking garage. Marcus started his engine and waited. When Jessica's car, a sleek silver Audi, pulled out of the garage, he followed at a careful distance. Surveillance was an art form, one that required patience and an almost meditative focus. Stay too close and you would be spotted. Stay too far back and you would lose your target in traffic. Marcus had done this in hostile cities where being caught meant death. Following an assistant through evening traffic was almost relaxing by comparison. Jessica drove north, away from the financial district, into a neighborhood that Marcus recognized as middle-class residential, not where he would have expected someone with her salary to live. She pulled into the driveway of a modest 2-story house with a well-kept lawn and children's toys scattered across the front porch. Marcus parked 2 houses down, watching as Jessica got out of her car and was immediately swarmed by 2 small children, a boy and a girl, both under the age of 8. They hugged her legs and she knelt down to embrace them, her professional demeanor melting into something softer, more vulnerable. A man appeared in the doorway, early 40s, wearing jeans and a t-shirt with a flower stain on the front. He kissed Jessica, took her purse, and ushered the family inside. Marcus sat in his car, watching the lights come on in the house, watching shadows move behind the curtain. This was not the home of a co-conspirator, of someone plotting murder for profit. This was the home of a woman trying to balance a demanding job with a family that needed her. But appearances could be deceiving. The best criminals were the ones who looked the most normal. He waited another hour, watching the house settle into its evening routine. Dinner time, judging by the way the family gathered around the dining room table. Then the children were ushered upstairs, probably for baths and bedtime stories. Normal, mundane, utterly ordinary. Marcus was about to call it a night when Jessica emerged from the house alone. She had changed into workout clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She got into her car and drove off, and Marcus followed once again. This time, she headed back toward the city center, pulling into the parking lot of a 24-hour gym. Marcus watched her go inside, his instincts prickling. It was past 8 o'clock. She had just gotten home from work, spent time with her kids, and now she was going to the gym. It was possible. People had routines that made no sense to outsiders, but it was also possible that the gym was a cover. A place where she could meet someone without arousing suspicion from her family or colleague. Marcus gave her 10 minutes. Then entered the gym himself. The front desk clerk barely glanced at him as he flashed a guest pass he had forged years ago and never thrown away. Old habits. The gym was moderately crowded, the evening rush of people trying to sweat away the stress of their day. Marcus spotted Jessica on a treadmill near the back, earbuds in, running at a steady pace. He took a position on a stationary bike where he could watch her without being obvious. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. She ran, checked her phone occasionally, wiped sweat from her face. Just another person exercising. Then she stopped, stepping off the treadmill and heading toward the locker rooms. Marcus waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. She did not emerge. He stood up, moving casually toward the corridor that led to the locker rooms and the back exit. As he rounded the corner, he saw her. She was standing near the emergency exit door, talking to a man Marcus did not recognize. He was middle-aged, nondescript, the kind of face you would forget 5 minutes after seeing. They were speaking in low, urgent tones, and Jessica was shaking her head, her body language defensive. The man handed her a manila envelope, the same kind Victoria had given Marcus. Jessica took it reluctantly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. She did not see Marcus in the shadows 20 feet away, half hidden behind a vending machine. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. The man left through the emergency exit, and Jessica stood there for a long moment, staring at the envelope in her hand. Her face was a mask of fear and something else. Resignation? Regret? She tucked the envelope into her gym bag and walked quickly back toward the main floor. Marcus did not follow her. Instead, he slipped out the emergency exit after the man. The back lot was dimly lit, and the man was already getting into a dark sedan parked near the fence. Marcus memorized the license plate, committing it to memory the way he had been trained. The car pulled away, and Marcus let it go. He had what he needed for now. Back in his own car, he sat in the darkness, processing what he had just witnessed. Jessica Liu was meeting someone in secret, receiving envelopes and going to great lengths to hide it from everyone in her life. It did not prove she was involved in the attempts on Victoria's life, but it was a connection, a thread he could pull. He needed to know who that man was and what was in that envelope. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent Victoria a simple text. Need to talk. Tomorrow before your lunch. Urgent. Her response came back within seconds. My office. 10 a.m. He started his car and drove home through the empty streets, his mind already working through the angles. Jessica Liu had secrets. Thomas Brennan was frustrated and potentially compromised. Martin Cross was still an unknown. And somewhere in the tangle of lies and half-truths, someone was pulling strings, orchestrating a campaign of terror against a woman woman whose only crime was inheriting her father's company. Marcus thought again about Sophie, the 7-year-old who loved dinosaurs. He thought about the children he had seen at Jessica's house, innocent and oblivious to the dark currents swirling around their mother's life. Everything was connected, but he could not yet see the shape of the whole picture. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle in the dark, feeling for edges, hoping the pieces would reveal themselves before someone got hurt, or worse, before someone died. He had 2 weeks, 11 days now. The clock was ticking, and somewhere out there, the person trying to kill Victoria Hayes was planning their next move. Marcus just had to find them first. Marcus arrived at Victoria's office at 9-40-5, early enough that the executive floor was still relatively quiet. He pushed his cleaning cart past the reception desk, nodding at the security guard who barely glanced up from his newspaper. Invisible. Perfect. He knocked twice on Victoria's door, a pre-arranged signal, and she opened it immediately, pulling him inside and locking the door behind him. She looked like she had not slept, dark circles beneath her eyes that makeup could not quite conceal, her hands trembling slightly as she gestured for him to sit. "What did you find?" she asked, dispensing with pleasantries. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and pulled out his phone, showing her the photo he had taken of the license plate from the previous night. "Your assistant is meeting someone in secret. This man at a gym last night." He gave her an envelope. "I need you to run this plate through your security team, but carefully. Do not let them know why you're asking." Victoria took the phone, staring at the license plate number. Her face had gone pale. "Do you think Jessica is the one trying to kill me?" "I think Jessica is involved in something she does not want anyone to know about," Marcus said carefully. "Whether that something is related to the attempts on your life, or if it is something else entirely, I cannot say yet. But people do not take secret meetings and accept mysterious envelopes because everything in their life is above board." Victoria sank into her chair, the weight of betrayal evident in every line of her body. "She has been with me for 3 years. She knows everything about my life, my schedule, where Sophie goes to school when my security shifts change. If she has been feeding information to someone, then every single attack could have been coordinated through her." Marcus nodded grimly. "That is why I need to know who that man was. Once we identify him, we can trace his connections, follow the money, find out who he is working for. In the meantime, you need to act normal around Jessica. Do not change anything. Do not let her know you suspect her. If she realizes we are onto her, she will either disappear or whoever she is working with will accelerate their plans." Victoria pressed her fingers to her temples, breathing slowly, visibly trying to maintain control. "How do you do this?" she asked quietly. "How do you suspect everyone, trust no one, and not lose your mind?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, remembering the wars he had fought, the operations where the enemy could be anyone, where paranoia was not a sickness but a survival skill. "You build compartments in your mind," he said finally. "You put the suspicions in one place and the emotions in another. You accept that the person sitting across from you might be trying to kill you, and you smile anyway because showing fear is weakness. It is not healthy and it is not sustainable, but it keeps you alive." Victoria looked at him with an expression that was part admiration, part pity. "That sounds like a terrible way to live." "It is," Marcus agreed. "That is why I stopped doing it. Or tried to." He stood up, glancing at his watch. "Your lunch with Martin is in 3 hours. I will be at the Riverside Club before you arrive, posing as part of the staff. I have a contact who owes me a favor. Watch Martin carefully. Notice if he is nervous, if he avoids eye contact, if his stories about your father do not quite line up. And Victoria, be safe." She met his eyes, and for a moment, the mask of the powerful CEO slipped entirely away, revealing the frightened woman beneath. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." He left through the service entrance, taking the stairs down to avoid the elevators and their security cameras. The rest of the morning was spent preparing for the lunch. Marcus called in the favor from his contact, a former Marine who now worked as a manager at the Riverside Club. Within an hour, he had a temporary position as a waiter for the afternoon shift. By 12:30, Marcus was dressed in the restaurant's uniform, a crisp white shirt and black vest, carrying a tray of water glasses as if he had done it his entire life. The Riverside Club was exactly what its name suggested, an exclusive establishment overlooking the river, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a clientele that arrived in cars worth more than most houses. Martin Cross arrived first, precisely at 12:50, 10 minutes early. Marcus watched him from the bar area where he was ostensibly polishing wine glasses. Martin was in his late 60s, distinguished in that way that came with money and power. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of watch that signaled you had made it. He was shown to a corner table with a view, and he sat down with the ease of someone who belonged in places like this. Victoria arrived at 1 o'clock exactly, and Marcus watched the interaction carefully. Martin stood to greet her, embracing her warmly, the kind of hug that spoke of long familiarity and genuine affection. They sat, and a server, not Marcus, brought menus and took their drink orders. Marcus positioned himself nearby, attending to a neighboring table that had just been seated, close enough to hear fragments of conversation. "How is Sophie?" Martin asked, his voice carrying genuine warmth. "Is she enjoying school this year?" Victoria smiled, and it was not the calculated smile Marcus had seen her use in business meetings. It was real. "She is wonderful, obsessed with dinosaurs at the moment. I cannot get her to stop talking about the Cretaceous period." Martin laughed, a deep, warm sound. She sounds exactly like her grandfather. He was the same way at that age, obsessed with whatever caught his interest, completely focused until he had learned everything there was to know. Your father would be so proud of her, and of you, Victoria. The mention of her father shifted something in the air. Victoria's smile faltered just slightly. I miss him, Martin, every day, especially lately with everything that has been happening. Martin reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I know, my dear, I miss him too. He was not just my business partner. He was my closest friend. We built something together, and I will never stop being grateful for that. Marcus watched Martin's face, looking for any sign of deception, any micro-expression that would indicate guilt or discomfort. He saw nothing but genuine grief and affection. Either Martin Cross was innocent, or he was the best liar Marcus had ever encountered. Victoria took a breath, and Marcus could see her preparing to probe deeper. Martin, can I ask you something? About the night my father died? Martin's expression shifted, a cloud passing over his features. Of course. Anything. You were there that night, were you not, at the office? Victoria asked, her voice gentle but probing. You found him, correct? Martin nodded slowly, his hand withdrawing from hers to grip his water glass. I was. We had been working late on the quarterly projections. Your father wanted to finalize the numbers before the board meeting the next morning. I left around 9:30 to get coffee from the break room. When I came back, he was slumped over his desk. I called 911 immediately, but it was too late. The paramedics said he was already gone. There were tears in Martin's eyes now, real tears that he did not try to hide. I held his hand until they arrived. I told him I was sorry, that I would take care of you and the company. I do not know if he heard me, but I needed to say it. Marcus felt his certainty wavering. This was not the response of a guilty man. This was grief, raw and unprocessed, still fresh despite the months that had passed. Victoria was crying now too, and Martin came around the table to sit beside her, holding her as she wept. I should have been there, Victoria said through her tears. I was at a conference in Boston. I did not even get to say goodbye. You said goodbye 1,000 times in 1,000 ways throughout your life, Martin said gently. He knew you loved him. That is all that matters. They composed themselves slowly, the lunch momentarily forgotten. Marcus moved to another table, giving them space while keeping them in his peripheral vision. When they finally returned to their meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Business matters, company gossip, but Marcus had seen what he needed to see. Martin Cross loved Victoria Hayes like a daughter. He had loved her father like a brother. If he was involved in the attempts on her life, then Marcus had fundamentally misread human nature. It was possible, but unlikely. He was about to mentally cross Martin off his suspect list when something happened that changed everything. A waiter Marcus did not recognize approached the table with a bottle of wine. Martin had apparently ordered it while Marcus was attending to another customer. The waiter poured 2 glasses and Martin raised his in a toast. To your father, and to the future of Hayes Technologies. May we honor his legacy by protecting what he built. They clinked glasses, and both took a sip. Marcus watched as Victoria swallowed, then paused. Her hand went to her throat and her eyes widened. Martin noticed immediately. Victoria, are you all right? She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her face was flushing red, her breathing becoming labored. Marcus was moving before his conscious mind even registered the danger. He dropped his tray, the crash of breaking glasses silencing the restaurant, and he was at Victoria's side in 3 strides. Allergic reaction, he said loudly, his voice commanding. Call 911 now. He pulled Victoria from her chair, laying her on the floor, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Her purse. He snapped at Martin, who was frozen in shock. Does she carry an EpiPen? Martin fumbled with Victoria's purse, pulling out an auto-injector. Marcus grabbed it, removed the cap, and jabbed it into Victoria's thigh through her skirt, holding it in place for the required 10 seconds. Around them, the restaurant had erupted into chaos. People standing, phones out, the manager rushing over. Victoria gasped, her airway opening, color slowly returning to her face. Marcus cradled her head, keeping her calm. You are okay, he said quietly. You are going to be okay, just breathe. She looked up at him, her eyes full of fear and understanding. The wine, she whispered. It was in the wine. Marcus looked at the bottle still sitting on the table. Then he looked at Martin, who had gone white as a sheet. I did not, Martin stammered. I would never. I just ordered the wine. I did not even touch the bottle. Marcus believed him. The attack had been too public, too reckless for Martin to have orchestrated. But someone had poisoned that wine, and someone had known exactly what Victoria would order, where she would be, and when she would be most vulnerable. Someone who had access to her schedule and her dining preferences. Someone like Jessica Liu. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Victoria was breathing easier now, the epinephrine doing its work. Marcus stood up, his mind racing. This was no longer just surveillance and investigation. This was an active threat, escalating rapidly. Whoever was behind this had just made a bold move in broad daylight in a crowded restaurant. They were getting desperate, which meant Victoria was running out of time. As the paramedics rushed in, Marcus caught Victoria's eye. She gave him the smallest of nods, a silent message. Find them before they try again. Marcus melted back into the crowd, removing his waiter's vest, becoming invisible once more. But his mind was on fire with a single burning thought. The hunter had just shown his hand. Now it was time for Marcus Chun to become the predator. Marcus did not go home. He did not return to his apartment or his routine or anything resembling normalcy. Instead, he went hunting. The attempted poisoning at the Riverside Club had been a calculated risk by someone who was either getting sloppy or running out of time. Either way, it was a mistake, and mistakes left trails. Marcus intended to follow every single one until he found the person at the end of it. He started with the restaurant. His Marine contact, Jake, met him in the back alley behind the Riverside Club an hour after the ambulance had taken Victoria to the hospital. Jake looked shaken, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by the hard focus of someone who had just seen combat spill into civilian life. "That was insane," Jake said, lighting a cigarette with trembling hand. "In all my years running this place, nothing like that has ever happened. Who poisoned someone at lunch?" Marcus took the offered cigarette. Though he had quit smoking years ago. "Someone who has access to the wine cellar or someone who paid off your staff. I need to see your security footage, Jake. All of it. From the moment the restaurant opened today until now." Jake exhaled smoke into the cold afternoon air. "Management is going to have my head for this. A customer nearly dies, and now you are telling me it was deliberate? We will be shut down, investigated, sued into oblivion. Help me find who did this, and I will make sure the investigation points away from your restaurant and toward the actual perpetrator," Marcus said. "You have my word." Jake studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Come on. The security office is in the base." The footage was comprehensive. 17 cameras covering every angle of the dining room, kitchen, bar, and back entrance. Marcus and Jake sat in front of the monitors, reviewing the timeline. The wine bottle in question had been brought up from the cellar at 12:45 by a sommelier named Andre, a man who had worked at the Riverside Club for 8 years with an impeccable record. Andre had placed the bottle on the service station near the kitchen, where it had sat for exactly 7 minutes before being taken to Martin's table. During those 7 minutes, 3 people had walked past the service station. 2 servers and 1 man in a dark suit who did not appear to be a customer. "Freeze that," Marcus said, pointing at the screen. "Who is that?" Jake leaned forward, squinting. "I do not recognize him. He is not wearing a staff uniform, and he is not sitting at any of the tables. How did he get into the restaurant?" They rewound the footage, tracking the man's entry. He had come in through the back kitchen entrance at 12:38, walking with the confidence of someone who belonged there. He had gone straight to the service station, spent 20 seconds near the wine bottle, and then left the same way he had entered. His face was partially obscured by a hat, but his build and mannerisms were familiar. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. It was the same man from the gym, the one who had given Jessica Lou the envelope. "That is him," Marcus said. "That is our guy. Can you enhance the image? Get a better look at his face?" Jake worked the controls, zooming in, adjusting the contrast and brightness. The image was grainy, but it was enough. Marcus took a photo with his phone. This man did not work alone. Someone had to tell him where Victoria would be, what wine would be ordered, and when the window of opportunity would open. Someone with intimate knowledge of her schedule and preferences. Marcus left the restaurant with the evidence he needed, his mind already constructing the chain of connections. The man had given Jessica an envelope at the gym. The man had poisoned the wine at the restaurant. Therefore, Jessica was the information source and the man was the executor. But who was giving the orders? Who was paying for this campaign of terror? Marcus needed leverage, and he needed it fast. Victoria was in the hospital, surrounded by security and medical professionals, relatively safe for the moment. But the moment she was discharged, the clock would start ticking again. He drove to Jessica Lou's house, the modest 2-story with the toys on the front porch. It was 3 in the afternoon and the house was empty. Jessica would be at the hospital with Victoria, performing her duties as the loyal assistant. Her husband would be at work and the children at school. Marcus had perhaps 2 hours before anyone returned. He had not broken into a building in 5 years, but like everything else from his old life, the skills came back instantly. The back door lock was laughably simple, a standard residential deadbolt that yielded to his lock picks in under 30 seconds. He was inside, closing the door behind him, his senses on high alert for alarms or surveillance systems. Nothing. The house was silent. Smelling faintly of breakfast and children's shampoo, Marcus moved quickly and efficiently through the rooms, looking for anything that connected Jessica to the man in the photographs. He started with the obvious places. Her home office was a small converted bedroom with a desk, a laptop, and a filing cabinet. Marcus pulled on latex gloves and began his search. The filing cabinet contained tax returns, mortgage documents, her children's school records. All normal. All boring. The desk drawers were similarly mundane. Office supplies, old bills, a half-finished novel. Then he found the laptop. It was password protected, but Marcus had tools for that too. A small USB drive that he had kept from his military days, loaded with software that could bypass most consumer-grade security. He plugged it in, initiated the program, and within 5 minutes, he had access. Jessica's email was a treasure trove of information, but not the information he had expected. There were no communications with mysterious assassins, no discussions of murder for hire, no smoking gun. Instead, there were emails from a collection agency, threatening letters about unpaid medical bills, correspondence with a bankruptcy attorney. Marcus opened the attached documents and began to read. Jessica's son, the little boy he had seen playing on the front porch, had leukemia. He had been diagnosed 2 years ago, and the treatments had been astronomical. The insurance had covered some of it, but not all. Jessica and her husband had burned through their saving, taken out a second mortgage, maxed out their credit cards. They were drowning in debt, close to losing the house, desperate. And then 6 months ago, the medical bills had suddenly stopped. The collection agencies had gone silent. The bankruptcy attorney had sent a final email saying his services were no longer needed. Someone had paid off Jessica's debts, all of them. Over $300,000 in medical expenses, gone. Marcus found the bank statements. The mysterious deposits that had come from an offshore account with no name attached. The dates coincided with the first incident, the near miss with the delivery truck. Jessica had been bought, not with a promise of wealth, but with the far more powerful currency of a mother's desperation. Someone had found her weakness, her dying child, and had offered her a devil's bargain. Feed them information about Victoria's schedule, and your son gets to live. Refuse, and watch him die knowing you could have saved him. It was brilliant in its cruelty. Jessica was not a villain. She was a victim, forced to choose between her employer and her child, and she had chosen her child as any parent would. Marcus closed the laptop, his anger a cold, focused thing. The person behind this was not just willing to kill, they were willing to exploit a mother's love, to weaponize her desperation. That took a special kind of evil. He photographed the bank statements, the medical bills, all the evidence he would need to prove Jessica's involvement and, more importantly, her coercion. Then he put everything back exactly as he had found it and left through the back door, locking it behind him. He had his information source. Now he needed the puppet master. Marcus sat in his car, reviewing everything he knew. Jessica had been compromised 6 months ago. The attempts on Victoria's life had started shortly after. The offshore account that had paid Jessica's debts was untraceable, but the timing was not. 6 months ago was also when Victoria's father had died. Suddenly, pieces began to click into place. What if the heart attack had not been natural? What if someone had killed Victoria's father and then, after a respectful waiting period, had begun eliminating his daughter to gain control of the company? Marcus pulled out his phone and called Victoria. She answered on the second ring, her voice weak but alert. "Marcus, are you all right?" he asked. "I am fine. They're keeping me overnight for observation, but the epinephrine worked. I'm going to be okay. Listen to me carefully," Marcus said. "I need you to get me the full autopsy report on your father. Not the summary, the complete medical examiner's report with toxicology screens, tissue samples, There was a pause. "Marcus, my father died of a heart attack. The doctors were clear." "Humor me," Marcus said. "Please." Another pause, then a resigned sigh. "I will have it sent to you by tonight. Is there something you are not telling me?" "I'm telling you that I think your father was murdered, and I think the same person who killed him is trying to kill you." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Who, Marcus? Who would do that?" "That is what I'm going to find out. Stay in the hospital as long as they will let you. Do not go home until I call you. And Victoria, do not trust anyone. Not Jessica, not Martin, not even your security team. Not until we know for certain who is behind this." Marcus hung up and sat in the growing darkness, his mind working through scenarios. If Victoria's father had been murdered, it would have required someone with access to his office, someone he trusted enough to let his guard down around. Martin had been there that night. Martin had found the body, but Marcus had seen Martin's grief, his tears, his genuine affection for Victoria. Unless Martin was a sociopath of the highest order, he was not the killer. So who else had been in the building that night? Who else had access? Marcus needed those autopsy results, but he also needed to keep moving. Sitting still meant giving the killer time to regroup, to plan their next move. He started the car and headed back to Apex Industries. It was time to go back to being invisible, to push his cleaning cart through the halls of Hayes Technologies and listen to the conversations people had when they thought no one important was around, because that was the thing about janitors. People talked around them like they were furniture. They discussed deals and schemes and secrets, never thinking that the man emptying their trash might be listening to every word. Marcus clocked in at 7, greeting Eddie with his usual nod. Eddie looked harried, shuffling through work orders with the frantic energy of a man who is perpetually behind. "You feeling better?" Eddie asked. "That bug pass?" "Yeah, much better." Marcus lied. "Thanks for covering for me." Eddie waved him off. "Just get back to work. The 40th floor needs a deep clean." Apparently, some executive spilled an entire pot of coffee in the conference room. Marcus took his cart and headed to the elevators, his face the picture of bored compliance. But inside, his mind was racing. The executive floors after hours were where the real work happened, where the masks came off and people revealed who they really were. Somewhere in those offices, in those files, in those carelessly spoken words, was the answer he was looking for. The killer had made mistakes, first with Jessica, then with the poisoning. They were getting desperate, moving too fast, taking risks they would not have taken if they were in control. And desperate people made fatal errors. Marcus just had to be there when it happened. The conference room on the 40th floor was indeed a disaster. Coffee splattered across the table, dripping onto the carpet. Marcus got to work, methodically cleaning, his ears tuned to every sound in the building. In the distance, he heard voices. 2 men arguing, their words echoing down the empty hallway. He recognized one of the voices immediately. It was Thomas Brennan, the head of security, and he was furious. Marcus moved quietly toward the voices, pushing his cart with deliberate slowness, the squeak of its wheels providing cover for his approach. The argument was coming from Brennan's office, the door partially open, light spilling into the darkened hallway. Marcus positioned himself near a drinking fountain 15 feet away, close enough to hear but far enough to maintain plausible deniability if discovered. He knelt down, pretending to clean the baseboard, his entire focus on the conversation drifting through the open door. "I do not care what your instructions were," Brennan was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "You do not make a move like that without consulting me first. Do you understand the position you have put me in? The liability?" The other voice was calmer, smoother, and chillingly familiar. It was a voice Marcus had heard before, though he could not immediately place it. "I apologize, Thomas. The situation required immediate action." Victoria Hayes was becoming too curious, asking too many questions. We needed to remind her of her vulnerability. Brennan slammed something on his desk, the sound sharp as a gunshot in the quiet building. "By poisoning her in a public restaurant? By creating an incident that now has the police investigating, the media asking questions, and every security protocol we have under scrutiny? That was not a reminder. That was a disaster." There was a pause, and when the other man spoke again, there was an edge to his voice that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Perhaps you are forgetting who is in charge here, Thomas. You have been well compensated for your cooperation. Your gambling debts, your offshore accounts, your comfortable lifestyle, all of that exists because I made it possible. Do not presume to lecture me about strategy." Brennan's response was quieter, defeated. "I am just saying we need to be smarter, more careful. Victoria survived today. Next time she might not, and if she dies under my watch with my security protocols in place, I am the first person they will investigate." "Then perhaps," the man said coldly, "you should ensure that when she dies, it does not look like a security failure. Make it look like an accident, or better yet, make it look like someone else's fault. The janitor, for instance. He has already proven himself capable of violence. It would not take much to frame him for a crime of passion." Marcus felt his entire body go rigid. They were planning to kill Victoria and pin it on him. He had become a convenient patsy, the violent veteran with a mysterious past who had inexplicably attached himself to the CEO. It was elegant in its simplicity, and it would work unless he moved first. The conversation was winding down, and Marcus heard footsteps approaching the door. He stood up quickly, pushing his cart toward the elevators, moving with the unhurried pace of someone who had nothing to hide. Behind him, he heard Brennan's office door close, followed by the sound of footsteps going in the opposite direction. Marcus did not look back. He rounded the corner, ducked into a supply closet, and pulled out his phone. He needed to identify that voice, needed to put a name to the man orchestrating everything. He texted Victoria, "Brennan is compromised. He is working with someone, but I did not see who. I need the employee database. Everyone who was in the building the night your father died. Everyone who has access to your security protocols. Can you get me that?" Her response came 5 minutes later. "Sending it now. Be careful, Marcus. They know about you." Marcus downloaded the file she sent, a comprehensive database of every employee with keycard access logs for the night of her father's death. 47 people had been in the building after hours that night. He began cross-referencing them with his mental list of suspects, eliminating the ones who did not fit the profile. Whoever was behind this had money, power, and intimate knowledge of Hayes Technologies' operation. They'd been able to pay off Jessica's medical debts, compromise Brennan, and orchestrate a series of sophisticated attacks that narrowed the field considerably. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Victoria containing the full autopsy report on her father. Marcus opened the attached PDF, his eyes scanning the medical jargon with the focused intensity of someone reading a treasure map. The official cause of death was listed as acute myocardial infarction, a massive heart attack. But buried in the toxicology report was a notation that made Marcus's breath catch. Elevated levels of potassium chloride detected in cardiac tissue. The medical examiner had noted it, but dismissed it as a post-mortem artifact, something that could occur naturally after death. But Marcus knew better. Potassium chloride was a favorite of sophisticated assassins because it occurred naturally in the body and was nearly impossible to detect unless you were specifically looking for it. Injected in sufficient quantities, it caused immediate cardiac arrest that looked identical to a natural heart attack. Victoria's father had been murdered. Someone had injected him with potassium chloride, probably while he was working late at his desk, probably by someone he trusted enough to let them approach without suspicion. Someone who had been in the building that night and had been found conveniently holding his hand when the paramedics arrived. Marcus felt sick as the pieces finally clicked into place. It had been right in front of him the whole time. He pulled up the access log for the night of the death and cross-referenced it with his suspect list. 2 names appeared with access to the executive floor at the time of death: Thomas Brennan and one other person, someone who had been conspicuously absent from all of Marcus's investigations because he had seemed above suspicion, someone who had been positioned perfectly to take control of Hayes Technologies if Victoria were to die without an heir. Derek Castellan, Victoria's ex-husband. Marcus felt like an idiot. He had been so focused on the inside threat on Jessica and Brennan and Martin that he had dismissed Derek as too obvious, too overt in his threats to be the real danger. But that was exactly the point. Derek had made himself look like an angry ex-husband, creating a paper trail of threats and bitter emails, establishing himself as the obvious suspect so that no one would seriously consider him. Meanwhile, he had been systematically eliminating anyone who stood between him and control of the company. First Victoria's father, the founder and controlling shareholder, then Victoria herself, whose death would throw the company into chaos and allow the board to appoint leadership that Derek, with his connections and his intimate knowledge of the company's operation, could manipulate or control. Marcus pulled up Derek's file from the employee database. He had worked at Hayes Technologies for 12 years, rising through the ranks to become vice president of operations before his divorce from Victoria. He had been removed from his position as part of the divorce settlement, but he still held a significant amount of company stock and maintained relationships with key board members. He had motive, opportunity, and the intelligence to pull off a campaign of sophisticated attacks. The voice Marcus had heard in Brennan's office suddenly clicked into place. It had been Derek. Slightly altered, more controlled than the angry ranting in his emails, but unmistakably him. Marcus had heard that voice once before in a video interview Derek had given to a business magazine 2 years ago, back when he was still Victoria's husband and the golden boy of Hayes Technologies. Marcus sat in the supply closet, his mind racing through implications and strategies. Derek was planning to kill Victoria and frame Marcus for it. Brennan was in on the plan, compromised by his gambling debts and Derek's money. Jessica was an unwitting accomplice, coerced through her son's medical bills. The attacks had been designed to look like random accidents, but the poisoning had been a panic move, something Derek had ordered when he realized Victoria was getting too close to the truth. Now they were in the endgame. Derek would not wait much longer. He would move soon, probably as soon as Victoria was discharged from the hospital. Marcus had to stop him, but he could not do it alone. He needed evidence that would hold up in court, proof that Derek had murdered Victoria's father and orchestrated the attacks on her. The autopsy report was suggestive, but not conclusive. The offshore accounts could be traced, but that would take time they did not have. Marcus needed a confession. He needed Derek to reveal himself, to make a mistake big enough that there would be no doubt about his guilt. And Marcus had an idea, a dangerous one, but it was the only play left. He texted Victoria, "I know who it is. Derek killed your father and is planning to kill you. Brennan is working with him. Do not react. Do not tell anyone, but I need you to do exactly what I say. Trust me one more time." Her response was immediate. "I trust you. What do you need me to do?" "Tomorrow morning," Marcus wrote, "you are going to announce that you have new evidence about your father's death. You are going to say you are meeting with the police to present this evidence at your home office tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Make sure Derek hears about it. Make sure Brennan hears about it. Make it public." "This is insane," Victoria wrote back. "You want me to paint a target on my back?" "I want Derek to think he has one last chance to silence you before the evidence goes public," Marcus replied. "He will come for you tomorrow night, and when he does, I will be waiting. We will catch him in the act, record everything, and end this." "And if something goes wrong?" Victoria asked. "Then I will do what I should have done in that parking garage," Marcus wrote. "I will make sure he never threatens you or Sophie again, no matter what it costs." It was a long pause before Victoria's response came through. "Okay, I will do it. But Marcus, please do not die protecting me. I have lost too many people already." Marcus stared at the message, feeling the weight of her fear and faith in equal measure. He thought about all the people he had failed to protect, all the promises he had broken, all the ghosts that haunted his 3 a.m. hours. This was his chance at redemption, his opportunity to save someone when it actually mattered. He would not fail Victoria Hayes. He would not fail Sophie. Even if it meant stepping back into the darkness he had spent 5 years trying to escape. Even if it meant becoming the weapon he had sworn he would never be again. He typed one last message: "I will see you tomorrow night. Stay safe until then." Then he turned off his phone, gathered his cleaning supplies, and went back to being invisible. But tomorrow night Marcus Chun would step out of the shadows, and Derek Castellan would learn that some men, once awoken, were far more dangerous than any corporate conspiracy. The announcement went out at 10 a.m. the following morning. Victoria Hayes, CEO of Hayes Technologies, held a brief press conference in the lobby of Apex Industries, surrounded by her security team and a handful of carefully selected reporters. Marcus watched from the maintenance closet across the hall. The door cracked just enough to see her face on the small television mounted in the corner. She looked pale but determined, every inch the grieving daughter seeking justice for her father. After careful review of medical records and consultation with independent forensic experts, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the cameras and microphones thrust toward her, "I have reason to believe that my father's death 6 months ago may not have been from natural causes. I have uncovered evidence that suggests foul play, and I will be meeting with law enforcement tonight at 8 p.m. at my private residence to turn over this evidence. I owe it to my father's memory to pursue the truth no matter where it leads or who it implicates." The reporters erupted with questions, but Victoria simply thanked them and walked away, flanked by her bodyguards. Marcus watched the feed cut to the news anchors, already speculating wildly about corporate intrigue and murder conspiracies. It was perfect. The bait had been set, broadcast to the world. Impossible for Derek to ignore. Marcus spent the rest of the day preparing Victoria's home for what was coming. She lived in a sprawling estate in the hills overlooking the city, the kind of place with gates and grounds and enough security to make a military base jealous. But security could be circumvented by someone who knew the systems, someone like Derek who had lived there during his marriage and understood every blind spot, every weakness. Marcus arrived at noon, posing as a contractor hired to install additional security cameras. Victoria's head of household security, a competent woman named Patricia, who was not part of Brennan's compromise team, checked his credentials and let him in without questions. She had been briefed by Victoria that morning and knew to cooperate fully with whatever Marcus needed. For the next 6 hours, Marcus transformed Victoria's home office into a trap. He installed hidden cameras in every corner, microphones disguised as electrical outlets, and motion sensors that would alert him the moment anyone entered the room. He studied the floor plans Patricia provided, memorizing every entrance, every window, every possible point of entry. He identified the route Derek would most likely take, the path of least resistance that avoided the main security checkpoints. It led through the gardens, past the pool house, to a side door that accessed the private wing where Victoria's office was located. The lock on that door was sophisticated, but not impossible to bypass for someone with the right tools and knowledge. Derek would use that entrance. Marcus was certain of it. At 6 p.m., Victoria arrived home with Sophie. The little girl ran through the house with the boundless energy of a 7-year-old, clutching a stuffed triceratops and chattering about her day at school. Marcus watched from the shadows as Victoria knelt down, embracing her daughter, whispering something in her ear that made Sophie giggle. Then Victoria handed Sophie off to her nanny, a kind-faced woman who would be taking the child to a friend's house for a sleepover. Sophie would be far away when Derek came calling. That was non-negotiable. Victoria found Marcus in her office, checking the camera feeds on his laptop. Everything was in position, every angle covered, every word that would be spoken in this room tonight captured in crystal clear digital quality. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, not looking up from his screen. "Terrified," Victoria admitted, closing the door behind her. "You think about what you said, that Derek killed my father, that he has been trying to kill me for months. I loved that man once, Marcus. We had a life together. How did I not see what he was capable of?" "You saw what he wanted you to see," Marcus said gently. "Sociopaths are experts at wearing masks. They show you the version of themselves that you want to believe in, and they hide everything else. It is not your fault you did not see it. It is his fault for being a monster." Victoria sat down in her desk chair, the same chair her father had died in, and Marcus saw her shudder. "I want this to be over. I want to know that Sophie is safe, that I can sleep without wondering if someone is going to sabotage my breaks or poison my food. I want my life back. After tonight you will have it," Marcus promised. "Derek will reveal himself. We will have everything on tape. The police will arrest him and he will spend the rest of his life in prison. You will be free." She looked at him with an expression that was part hope, part fear. "And what about you, Marcus? What happens to you after tonight?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question he had been avoiding. "When this is over, I go back to being invisible. Back to my quiet life, my apartment, my night shifts." This was a temporary detour, not a permanent change. "You could stay," Victoria said softly, "not as a janitor, as head of security, as a consultant, as whatever you want to be. You have saved my life more times than I can count. You have proven yourself to be someone I can trust in a world where trust is a rare commodity. I could use someone like you in my life, in Sophie's life." Marcus met her eyes and saw the unspoken question there, the possibility of something more than a professional relationship. He felt the pull of it, the temptation to step into a different future, one where he was not alone, where he had a purpose beyond mopping floors and hiding from his past. But he also knew the cost. The nightmares would not stop, the ghosts would not leave. He was too broken for the life she was offering, and eventually she would see that brokenness and regret ever letting him in. "I cannot," he said, and the words hurt more than he expected. "I am not the man you think I am, Victoria. I am good at violence and surveillance and catching killers, but I am terrible at everything else. At being present, at being whole, at being someone worth caring about. You deserve better than a broken soldier who wakes up screaming at 3 in the morning." She reached across the desk and took his hand. "Maybe I do not want better. Maybe I want you. Broken pieces and all." Marcus gently pulled his hand away, steeling himself against the ache in his chest. "Ask me again when this is over, when Derek is in custody and you have had time to think clearly. If you still want me in your life, then we will talk, but not now. Not when emotions are running high and gratitude feels like something more." Victoria nodded, disappointment flickering across her face, but she did not push. "Okay, after tonight then, we will talk." At 7:30, Marcus sent Victoria to her bedroom on the second floor, far from the office where the confrontation would take place. Patricia and 2 trusted security guards were stationed with her, armed and ready to respond if anything went wrong. Marcus positioned himself in the office, sitting in the shadows behind the door, his body a coiled spring ready to release. He had a gun, borrowed from Patricia's personal collection, though he hoped he would not need to use it. He wanted Derek alive, wanted him to face justice in a courtroom, wanted the world to see him for what he truly was. But if it came down to a choice between Derek's life and Victoria's safety, there would be no hesitation. Marcus would do what he had been trained to do. He would eliminate the threat. The house settled into an eerie quiet as 8 p.m. approached. The security cameras showed the grounds bathed in the soft glow of landscape lighting, the gardens peaceful, the pool shimmering like liquid glass. Then, at 8-0-7 movement, a figure emerged from the tree line at the edge of the property, moving low and fast, avoiding the main security lights. Derek Castellan was right on time. Marcus watched on his laptop as Derek approached the side door exactly as predicted. He was dressed in dark clothing, a baseball cap pulled low over his face, and he carried a small backpack that likely contained his tools and whatever weapon he planned to use. Derek worked on the lock for less than a minute before the door swung open silently. He slipped inside, closing it carefully behind him, and began moving through the darkened hallways toward Victoria's office. Marcus switched off his laptop and pocketed his phone, both of which would continue recording remotely. He positioned himself behind the door, his back against the wall, his breathing slow and controlled. He heard Derek's footsteps in the hallway, cautious but confident, the tread of someone who knew this house intimately. The office door opened slowly and Derek stepped inside, his hand reaching for the light switch. Marcus let him turn it on, let him take 3 steps into the room, let him see the empty desk and realize something was wrong. Then Marcus closed the door behind him with a soft click, and Derek spun around, his hand diving into his backpack. "Hello, Derek," Marcus said calmly, his gun pointed at Derek's chest. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Derek froze, his eyes going wide, then narrowing with calculation. He pulled his hand slowly from the backpack, holding it up in a gesture of surrender. "Who the hell are you?" Derek asked, his voice steady despite the gun. Marcus smiled, a cold, humorless expression. "I am the janitor, the one you were planning to frame for Victoria's murder, the one who has been watching you, tracking you, unraveling every thread of your conspiracy. And tonight, Derek, you are going to confess to everything you have done, because every word you speak in this room is being recorded, and by the time the sun rises tomorrow, the world will know exactly what kind of monster you are." Derek's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, fear, and finally, cold acceptance. He had been outmaneuvered, and he knew it. But Marcus also saw something else in Derek's eyes: desperation. And desperate men were the most dangerous kind. "We can make a deal," Derek said, his hands still raised. "I have money, offshore accounts, connections. Name your price. I will pay anything if you let me walk out of here." Marcus shook his head. "There is no deal, Derek. There is only justice. Now start talking. Tell me how you killed Victoria's father. Tell me about the attacks. Tell me everything. And maybe the prosecutor will consider cooperation when they are deciding whether to pursue the death penalty." Derek's face hardened, and Marcus saw the mask finally slip away completely, revealing the cold, calculating predator under. "You think you have won," Derek said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think this is over, but you have no idea what you have stepped into, janitor. This is bigger than me, bigger than Victoria, bigger than you can possibly imagine, and the people I work for do not leave loose ends." Before Marcus could respond, Derek's hand shot back into his backpack, moving with desperate speed. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger, his training screaming at him to fire, to put Derek down before whatever he was reaching for became a threat. But in that split second of hesitation, Derek pulled out not a gun, but a phone. He pressed a single button, and somewhere in the house, an explosion shattered the night. The floor beneath Marcus's feet shook, and the sound of screaming reached him from the second floor, from the direction of Victoria's bedroom. Derek smiled, a terrible, triumphant expression. "Checkmate," he whispered. Then he charged. Marcus had a choice to make in the space of a heartbeat: shoot Derek and secure the confession, or run toward the explosion and save Victoria. There was no real choice. He had made a promise, and this time he would not fail. Marcus pivoted and ran, leaving Derek behind, his feet pounding through the hallway toward the stairs. Behind him, he heard Derek's laughter, wild and unhinged, followed by the sound of footsteps running in the opposite direction toward escape. Let him run. Marcus would hunt him later. Right now, Victoria needed him. The second floor was chaos. Smoke poured from Victoria's bedroom, the acrid smell of explosives mixing with burning fabric and wood. The door had been blown off its hinges, and Marcus could hear Patricia screaming orders, trying to coordinate a response. He burst into the room and saw Victoria on the floor, Patricia shielding her with her own body, both of them covered in dust and debris. The 2 security guards were down, unconscious but breathing, caught too close to the blast. The explosion had been small, contained, designed not to kill but to create chaos and distraction. Derek had planted it days ago, probably during one of his many visits to see Sophie, a final insurance policy activated when his plan went sideways. "Are you hurt?" Marcus shouted over the ringing in his ears. Victoria looked up, her face streaked with blood from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were clear and focused. "I am okay." "Sophie, Marcus, where is Sophie?" "She is safe," Marcus said, pulling Victoria to her feet. "She's at her friend's house, remember? Far away from here. But Derek is escaping. We need to go now." Patricia was already on her phone, calling for police and medical assistance, but Marcus knew they would arrive too late. Derek had planned his exit strategy carefully, and every second they delayed gave him more distance, more opportunity to disappear into whatever network of co-conspirators was waiting to extract him. Marcus made a decision. He pulled Victoria toward the window that overlooked the back gardens. The explosion had shattered the glass, leaving a gaping opening to the outside. 3 stories down, but there was a drainage pipe and a trellis that could support their weight. "I need you to trust me one more time," Marcus said. "We are going after him. Together. We end this tonight." Victoria looked at the drop, then back at Marcus, and something fierce ignited in her eyes. She was done being a victim, done running, done letting Derek terrorize her life. She nodded. "Let us finish this." They climbed down together, Marcus first to test the holds, then Victoria following with surprising agility. They dropped the last 6 feet into the garden, landing hard but uninjured. In the distance, Marcus saw Derek sprinting toward the perimeter fence, his silhouette stark against the landscape lighting. He was heading for a service gate on the eastern edge of the property, a blind spot in the security coverage that he had probably exploited before. Marcus and Victoria ran after him, cutting across the manicured lawn, past the pool, through the rose garden where thorns caught at their clothes. Marcus could hear sirens in the distance, emergency services responding to the explosion, but they were still minutes away, and minutes might as well be hours. Derek reached the gate and vaulted over it with practiced ease, landing on the access road beyond. Marcus hit the fence 2 seconds later, pulling himself up and over in a fluid motion that his body remembered from obstacle courses run a lifetime ago. Victoria was right behind him, her expensive dress torn, her heels abandoned somewhere in the garden, running barefoot on determination alone. They emerged onto a narrow maintenance road that wound down the hillside toward the city lights below. Derek was 50 yards ahead, running hard, his phone pressed to his ear, shouting coordinates to whoever was coming to extract him. Marcus pushed himself faster, his lungs burning, his old wounds aching, but none of it mattered. This was the moment everything had been leading to. This was redemption or failure, and he would not accept failure. Derek glanced back and saw them gaining. He veered off the road into the dense underbrush, taking a shortcut down the steep hillside. Marcus followed without hesitation, plunging into the darkness beneath the trees, branches whipping at his face, roots trying to trip him with every step. The terrain was treacherous, but Marcus had trained in worse. He had run through jungles and deserts and mountains, always pursuing, always hunting. This was what he had been made for. Victoria stayed close behind him, her breathing ragged but determined, refusing to give up, refusing to let Derek escape justice. They crashed through the underbrush, sliding down muddy slopes, using trees to break their descent. Ahead, Marcus saw Derek stumble and fall, tumbling down a rocky incline before catching himself on a fallen log. Marcus closed the distance, launching himself through the air, tackling Derek before he could regain his feet. They rolled together down the slope, locked in combat, fists and elbows in desperate grappling. They came to a stop at the bottom of a shallow ravine, both men gasping for breath. Derek swung wildly, catching Marcus in the jaw, but Marcus absorbed the blow and responded with a precise strike to Derek's solar plexus that left him gasping. Derek tried to run again, but Marcus grabbed his ankle, yanking him back, and this time there would be no escape. This time the monster would face what he had done. Victoria appeared above them on the slope, her silhouette framed against the city lights, and she climbed down carefully, her bare feet finding purchase on the rocky ground. She stood over Derek, who was pinned beneath Marcus, his face pressed into the dirt, his arms wrenched behind his back. "You killed my father," Victoria said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You tried to kill me. You terrorized my daughter. Why, Derek? We had everything together. We could have built something beautiful. Why did you destroy it?" Derek laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Because it was never yours, Victoria. It's mine. I worked for 15 years to build Hayes Technologies into what it became. I brought in the military contracts. I developed the drone systems. I was the one with the vision, but your father never saw it. He only saw you, his precious daughter, the heir to his empire. And when he wrote that will, when he left you everything and gave me nothing, I realized the truth. I was never family. I was just the help, so I took what should have been mine. I removed your father from the equation, married you to get close to the company, and when the time was right, I would have removed you too. The board members I had cultivated would have appointed me CEO, and I would finally have the recognition I deserved. It was perfect. Until you showed up," he spat, glaring at Marcus. "Until this nobody janitor ruined everything." Marcus tightened his grip on Derek's arms. "It is over. The police are on their way. Everything you just said was recorded." He tapped his pocket where his phone had been recording the entire chase. "You are done, Derek." Victoria knelt down, getting close to Derek's face, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My father trusted you. I loved you. And you betrayed us both for pride and greed. I hope it was worth it, Derek. I hope whatever they give you in prison, solitary confinement for the rest of your miserable life, was worth destroying everything you ever had." The sound of vehicles approached from above, police cars and emergency response flooding the estate. Flashlights cut through the darkness, voices calling out, and within moments, officers were swarming down the hillside. Marcus released Derek to them, stepping back as they cuffed him and read him his rights. Derek said nothing more. The mask was gone, the pretense abandoned. He was just a broken, bitter man who had gambled everything and lost. In the aftermath, as the sun began to rise over the city, Marcus and Victoria sat on the steps of her devastated home, wrapped in emergency blankets, giving statements to detectives who seemed overwhelmed by the scope of the conspiracy. The recordings Marcus had made provided irrefutable evidence. Derek's confession, the proof of his coordination with Brennan, the trail of payments to Jessica Liu, all of it painted a complete picture of calculated murder and attempted murder. Brennan was arrested at his home before dawn. Jessica was brought in for questioning, but the evidence of her coercion and her son's illness led prosecutors to offer her immunity in exchange for testimony. She would face no charges, only the guilt of knowing her silence had nearly cost Victoria her life. Martin Cross arrived as the sun climbed higher, his face ashen with shock and grief. He embraced Victoria, both of them crying for the man they had lost and the betrayal that had stolen him from them. Sophie returned home to find her mother alive and safe, and she launched herself into Victoria's arms with a force that nearly knocked them both over. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in his small apartment, packing the few possessions that mattered into a duffel bag. His notice had been given to Eddie, who had been surprised but understanding. The trial was scheduled for next month, and Marcus would testify, but after that, he had decided to leave the city. There were too many memories here. Too much noise. He needed to find a quiet place, somewhere he could disappear again and try to rebuild the peace he had lost. There was a knock at his door. When he opened it, Victoria stood there wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking more at ease than he had ever seen her. Sophie was beside her, holding her stuffed triceratops, her eyes wide with curiosity. "We came to say thank you," Victoria said, "and to ask you one more time. Stay, please. Not as an employee, not as a bodyguard, but as family. Sophie needs someone like you in her life. Someone who will protect her and teach her to be brave. And I need you, Marcus. I know you are broken. I know you have demons. But so do I. We can be broken together." Marcus looked at this woman who had somehow seen past all his walls, past all his carefully constructed invisibility, and had chosen to care about him anyway. He looked at Sophie, who smiled at him with her mother's eyes, and he thought about all the promises he had broken, all the people he had failed to save, but he had saved them. He had kept Victoria alive. He had given Sophie her mother back. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was the beginning of something new. He set down his duffel bag and knelt so he was eye level with Sophie. "Do you really want a broken soldier hanging around?" he asked gently. And Sophie nodded solemnly. "My mom says you are a hero, and heroes are supposed to stick around to fight the next bad guy." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in years. "Well, I suppose I cannot argue with that logic." He stood up and looked at Victoria. "Okay, I will stay, but I'm still going to wake up screaming sometimes. I'm still going to have bad days." Victoria stepped forward and took his hand. "Then I will be there to wake you up. We will face the bad days together." And slowly, in the warmth of her touch and the promise of a future he had never dared to imagine, Marcus Chun began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than the sum of his failures. Maybe he could be the man they needed him to be. And in a world that had taken so much from him, that was a gift beyond measure.